This meeting is being recorded.
Hey folks, welcome back to Ken Michaels Radio. And I just want to say a big thank you to all the nice comments I've been getting in the last few shows. I've had so much fun with the panels that I've assembled and continuing to do more and more talk about the Beatles. My guest this time has been on my channel twice before. You might recall when we did a show on John's Walls and Bridges album, where he considered it his best solo album. And more recently, we talked about George Harrison's Extra Texture album. And he is back now to talk about Dark Horse. And we may have a bit of an announcement to make about this guest and George Harrison towards the end of the show, I think. Let's tease them all.
Let's tease them all. It's a book.
Oh, Jay, give it away right now.
All right, I've lost us half the viewers.
Eoghan Lyng is back with us, and he is a music journalist, and he has written for, let's see, Culture Sonar, We Are Cult, Record Collector, Newsound Magazine, and more recently I read an article on Penny Black Music online when he interviewed Claude Wallinger of World Party.
You read that?
I read it. You know, I like some of World Party stuff. I don't know all of it, but I do like a lot of Carl's music. Yeah. So, Eoghan, welcome back to our channel.
Thank you. Yeah, so now I pretty much write full time for Far Out Magazine. It's a UK magazine.
Okay.
That's fine, but those are my past accomplishments. And yeah, I mean, you make me sound like I'm an accomplished young man. So I'll say thank you for that.
So Eoghan is back with us to talk about George Harrison's 1974 album called Dark Horse. He wrote an article on the album for Culture Sonar a few years ago. And I actually have a few quotes that I will read a little bit later on for that article that really impressed me a lot. But before we talk about the album, I thought I'd give you guys a little backstory on 1974 for George Harrison, because it was a really busy year for him. He was on sabbatical in India in February. In March, he recorded the Shankar Family and Friends album in Los Angeles at A&M Records. He also formed Oops Publishing, what a name, Oops Publishing for the publishing end for the British for England, how that was handled over there. He launched Dark Horse Records on May 23rd. The formation of the label was announced at a press conference in June. He worked on Splinter's album, The Place I Love, all year. And he played on all the tracks and produced the album as well. And that album was released in September. As if that wasn't enough, he worked again with Ravi Shankar. He produced a concert called Music Festival from India at the Royal Albert Hall in London, and accompanied Ravi's musicians on a European tour. And the tour wrapped up the second week in October. And then right after that, there are rehearsals for George's tour. He worked on his own Dark Horse album and launched his first full-scale tour of the US, I should say North America, because it also included Canada. November 2nd, he played in Vancouver, and it went on through December the 20th with 2 shows at New York's Madison Square Garden, 45 concerts in 26 cities spread over 7 weeks. The rehearsals for the tour ran for 2.5 weeks in LA. That was in October, right after the Ravi Shankar tour. And the Dark Horse album was released December 9th of 74. What a mistake right there. December 9th, it started over a month after the tour started. So you couldn't even buy the album. And there were only 2 weeks left of the tour. So we're going to talk a lot about the album, and I know that you're very impressed by this particular album. There's always been a lot of criticism because of the fact that, well, according to the critics, it sounds very rushed. George's voice was hoarse. A lot of puns were made because of the title and horse. And so, and I sometimes think, because that Dark Horse tour had an incredible effect, I think, on George, to the point where he didn't really want to tour again. And it was only until he did a brief tour with Eric Clapton in 1991 in Japan that he ever did concerts again, because he got such bad reviews of the tour, and the album as well wasn't that well received. Do you think that this album really deserves to be reassessed?
Yes and no. I think it needs to be reassessed in his body of work. But I don't think it's a great album as a standalone piece. In terms of him as an artist, I think it's an essential part of his artistic journey. But but for a new time buyer shouldn't be their first George Harrison album. This should be when you've gotten used to his material.
Should you think a little bit less of this album coming off Living in the Material World? I mean, there's always that issue of quality versus quantity. And to me, quantity matters a lot. And when you're used to having albums where you've got 10 to 12 songs, and here Dark Horse has 9, should we think a little bit less of it? Like maybe he couldn't be as productive. And actually, Ding Dong Ding Dong is believed to have been started in 1973, and possibly So Sad as well. Both those songs have Ringo on drums. Do you think in any way, because of the quantity of songs, maybe we should think a little bit less of George at this point, or do you just mainly care about how good those songs really are?
I'm about the quality of the songs. I think actually, for people who are more into rock-oriented music, this is actually an improvement on Living in the Material World, because there's nary an electric guitar in Living in the Material World. I think it's a very mature album. It's not an album I enjoyed when I was even in my early 20s. I'm 28 now, and it's only recently that I've kind of thought, oh, this is actually a very beautiful album. It's very lyrical. So in that sense, I would say Dark Horse is actually a really good guitar album. It's just the vocals are the problem.
Yeah, something, when that album came out, I'm revealing my age here, I was 15 back then, and I didn't really pay too much attention about his voice being hoarse. I was so used to the album the way it was. It sounded pretty natural to me, to the point where when I just recently saw on YouTube a performance of the song Dark Horse when George was in Fort Worth, Texas, and it sounds pretty much like the album. His voice was pretty strong on that particular song. Well, I still liked his voice on the studio recording, but I don't know. Do you really? Does it bother you the quality of his voice on this album all these years later? Is it that noticeable to you? Maybe I'm just so used to George's voice in particular on all of his albums that I don't really hear that big a difference in the quality of his voice. That's just me.
I can hear it on Maya Love. He's really straining. It's a really nice melody, and he's just not hitting the notes. Yeah. It's Maya Love. Okay, that's a slight exaggeration, but it's that kind of horsey, kind of crispy. It actually works really nicely on the title track because it's so venomous and so angry so it's kind of Dylan-esque in that regard. I think that was where it really works. And on So Sad, where he just sounds so worn out, so sad. But on other songs, you want a better vocal. Maya Love is one. I would even go for the cover by Maya Love.
I still think his vocals were strong myself, especially there are higher notes in So Sad. And when your range is still pretty good, I sometimes think maybe the critics were a bit too harsh on George at that point. But
for sure.
Do you look at this album as being a progression in George as a songwriter and recording artist, or do you just think that throughout most of his solo career he was consistently the same and fairly strong?
I would see this as the third chapter in his spiritual religious trilogy, because from after this he tones back the kind of the spiritualism. He's not admonishing people for not believing in God in the way that he has been on the first three, and he's not admonishing himself in the same way that he has been on the first three albums. He makes a decision on extra texture, not to make any overt spiritual allusions. And when he comes back to it on 33 and the George Harrison album, it's much more contained. So I think this is the closing chapter. This is the closing part of a trilogy, of a 3-album trilogy.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. Whenever I think about 33 and a third, I'm so influenced by this song and the humor in this song and the humor in Crackerbox Palace and the video for Crackerbox Palace. I look at it as being the lighter side of George. You know, yes, there's still some spiritual themes in there with Dear One, for example, but I think he really toned himself back spiritually for all the people who thought that he was way too preachy, especially at that time. When you see George and you know that he's always had a wacky sense of humor, especially with his love for Monty Python, it's very evident there. But yeah, I think the public tends to like George a lot when he's not overly spiritual and preachy, telling you how to live. You know, the Lord loves the one that loves the Lord, and if you don't and if you don't get, then you don't get loving. You know, I think that turns off some people, you know. And then when he's doing the lighter stuff like this song or Crackerbox Palace or something like that, then the public, it's the same thing with Cloud9, you know, showing the humor and embracing the past. But speaking of embracing the past, Ding Dong Ding Dong, there's no way that I can think of that song without thinking about the video. And you know, he's wearing all these Beatle uniforms, and he's even wearing his birthday suit at one moment in the video. So there's always that side of George that seems uncomfortable with his Beatle past, and then there's the other side of George that brings it back with a video like that. What did you think of that video and the song Ding Dong Ding Dong, which I always used to bring in the new year on New Year's Day at midnight? Do you think that Ding Dong Ding Dong is just, you know, a light exercise, a very simple song that he just came up with, or is it really appropriate for something like, you know, the end of the year and New Year's Day?
No, it's a good song. I think the issue is the vocals. I'm one of those who thinks Try Some Buy Some was much better under Ronnie Spector's voice than George Harrison's. I think there he's struggling to hit the chorus line. I think George himself knew he wasn't the strongest vocalist in the world, and I think sometimes he might have underestimated his abilities. I think Ding Dong Ding Dong might have been served by a better singer. Even George at his peak, I don't think could have nailed. I think he could have done maybe. I could imagine Tom Jones singing, "Bring out the old, bring in the
new." That wouldn't have worked very well.
I think he could have worked. Bring out.
That's not the appropriate George Harrison song for Tom Jones. But I actually love his music a lot. I think he's one of the great singers. And he's still fantastic, you know.
I know. Yeah. But it's funny how even the simplest of songs, he gives it that he did a cover of Gilbert O'Sullivan, and it's such a lovely plaintive song called Nothing Rhymes. And Tom comes in, if I give up my sentimental to an elderly lady or man. Yeah. The other singer who's like that is also a Welsh singer, Shirley Bassey.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there are people who do like a lot of those covers, and that's part of to me, it's not everything, but it's part of what makes a song great is when it can lend itself to so many different arrangements and interpretations from different types of singers. So yeah, but you like the song Ding Dong Ding Dong a lot. Yes,
I like it. As I say, it's the vocals that let it down a bit. I think he's mocking the Beatles with, you know, the Sgt. Pepper, and even the cover of Dark Horse is clearly a pastiche of Sgt. Pepper.
Good point. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, let's talk about
Yeah.
some of the tracks on Dark Horse besides Ding Dong Ding Dong. But Harry's on Tour is such, to me, it's a killer instrumental. I absolutely loved Harry's on Tour, and Perfect. Of course, he wrote it so that he could do it on tour. But what do you make of that as a great? I am already giving my opinion. What do you make of it as an opening track?
I think you're being too nice. I think it's absolutely spectacular. I think George should have recorded more instrumentals. I mean, there's that. There's Marble Blues, Cry for a
Grease.
Shadow. Those are the only. Yeah.
There's Grease.
Those are basically the only. What?
Grease from Gon Trapo.
Grease.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I
like
wish
that's four.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I can think of off the top of my head. Yeah. I can't think
Yeah.
of any others. But yeah.
Mhm.
And it's got a great hook to it, and it's so perfect for a band to kick off a concert with.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, you could just imagine George getting into the rock poses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That wasn't his style. Yeah.
That wasn't what?
It wasn't really his style. He wasn't really, the kind of the Eddie Van Halen kind of.
That's true. What do you make of,
Yeah.
because at that time he had become friends with the LA Express.
Yeah.
And so they played on that track and they played on Simply Shady.
Yeah.
How do you like the musicianship? Do you notice a change at all in the sound or in the playing of Dark Horse versus All Things Must Pass and Living in the Material World? Or, because he always had stellar musicians no matter what on all of his albums.
He did, yeah. It's a bit looser. I mean, the drums and the bass are a bit more influential. He seems to be following the drums rather than the drums following him, if you get what I mean. It's a bit funkier. He would go properly funky on Woman Don't You Cry For Me a few years later. Yeah, which is not a very good track, but that's by the by.
I love that one.
Uh,
Are you kidding? That's another good opening song for me anyway, but
so yeah, no, I think they loosened him up, and it must have been refreshing to play with new guys. So it's not Klaus and Ringo like he had on the first two. It's these new, younger, fresher musicians, and like a lot of English musicians of his age, he thought he loved working with American musicians. That's quite common. I mean, when Genesis needed another guitar player, when Mike Rutherford, needed to switch from bass to electric guitar and back and forth, he said, well, the guy I'm sharing with should be American, because he says American sessioneers are way better than British sessioneers.
interesting. And the whole relationship that George had with people like Andy Newmark,
Yeah.
Willie Weeks, that all started around this particular time. So, and they ended up touring with George in '74 too.
Yeah.
So now Simply Shady is a song you're not too fond of.
No, I love it.
Oh, I didn't get that impression from your article.
What did I say? It was a couple of years ago.
Let me think. I don't have the entire article in front of me, but I know you called it naked in this one.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's not a bad thing.
Yeah, because you feel it's very stripped down in the arrangement.
Yeah, really stripped down. It's like, I mean, the Plastic Ono band album is naked and confessional, and that's a superb album. Yeah. Or say Maybe I'm Amazed is so naked. It's Paul saying I don't know how I can live without Linda. Or Calico Skies is so naked. It's like it's that kind of raw opening my heart. So this is George confronting his alcoholism.
That's what you think the song is about?
Well, that's what he said it was about.
I have to look it up. I got the book behind me of I Mean Mine. I can check right now.
He gave an interview where he said I wasn't ready to join Alcoholics Anonymous, but Simply Shady was me talking about my alcoholism.
Okay.
There's a
Yeah, I've always thought the song had great hooks in it, great melody, and I love the sound of George's voice on it too.
Yeah.
So while I'm looking for I Mean Mine, let's talk about So Sad. And that's, to me, that's one of the highlights of the album.
I agree. It's very naked, very raw, very. It's clearly about his impending divorce. I mean, this is much more. It was quite uncommon for George to be quite this revelatory of it. I don't think. Oh my God. I think this is the most, revelatory he's been since Something. That it's the greatest insight into his personal life he's given. I mean, I know in later years he denied that Something was about Patty, but I think everyone knows that it was about her.
Well, yeah, I mean, if it's about a woman at the time that he wrote it, you'd think it must be about her.
Yeah.
But there's a part of me that just wants to go by what the songwriter says. And so much of George's stuff can also be interpreted as being, about God too. But if you're talking about something in the way she moves, it's easy to think that it's about Patty. Okay, Simply Shady is about what happens to naughty boys in the music business. I suppose I got the idea here at home, and then I escaped to India after that, and I wrote it in Bombay. It was a funny sort of song to be writing in Bombay, especially after the one about karma. So it doesn't say anything about alcoholism in that song.
Well,
maybe you heard about it in another interview or something, or?
Yeah, it's from another interview. I'm just gonna look now.
But So Sad, what's great about So Sad for me is the guitar playing in there and the picking of the notes, how it's played. It's kind of reminiscent of Here Comes the Sun, and the way that Here Comes the Sun ends with the guitar playing from George. It's a similar style. You play those two songs back to back. I'm not saying it's exactly the same, but you think about the way that Here Comes the Sun ends with the individual notes that he plays, and he kind of does the same thing on So Sad. But it's a gorgeous melody, and I can remember it getting lots of airplay here in New York when I used to listen to rock radio in New York back then.
Yeah,
still do, but I mean at that time.
I'm looking at the Wikipedia page for Simply Shady, and he does say, I was on a bit of a bender. And in the UK and Ireland, bender means a bit of a drinking a lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. But I'm just trying to get to where you think George was at that time coming off of living in the material world, and was he improving as a songwriter? Was he looking for different things to write about? How do you see him evolving as a songwriter at that time?
I don't know if it's him improving as more him continuing. He's proven himself with the first two albums, and this is a natural progression. And it gives him a chance to experiment with certain forms. I mean, Simply Shady is fairly experimental for a George Harrison song. I mean, it's very different to anything that was heard on Living in the Material World. It's much bluesier, it's much harsher, and So Sad has like a lovely guitar figure. Ding 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 ding. Oh, so sad. I can't do it. But as that lovely little I actually prefer his version of So Sad to the Splinter version. I think it's more authentic.
You mean it was Alvin Lee and Mylon Lefevre.
That's
So
true.
sad. Yeah, that's okay. A few of the songs that are on Dark Horse that were earlier versions that came out, like with Far East Man and Ron Wood, that version came out before Dark Horse. But So Sad to me is top-notch Harrison right there. Definitely feel that way. When you talk about Simply Shady being more blues, you don't think that, say, Sumi Suyu blues wasn't bluesy on Living in the Material World? Or a different
I guess it's different type. I think I meant blues rock. I mean, sort of.
Okay.
I mean, it's got the tremoling guitar pattern that really kind of seals, Simply Shady. ow, and it,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, George was first and foremost a guitar player, so it's wonderful when he's letting the guitar just wail on not even his songs, but any song where he's just loosening up and just going. There's a lovely bit in the Get Back series, the Peter Jackson, where he says, "My fingers I'm really loosening up," and that after like weeks of rehearsal, that he's able to fire away in a way he couldn't 2 weeks earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've got to get you to talk about Get Back at some point, because I can never talk enough about that documentary.
Yeah.
But
Oh, it was a hit. Yeah.
it's amazing. It's the greatest present we've had as Beatle fans since the anthology, really.
Yeah. It was the greatest thing. And I was disappointed by the Bond film. That was not worth waiting 2 years for. But this was worth waiting a lifetime for. This was worth waiting 50 years for. Get Back.
Oh, I wish it wasn't 50 years, but yeah, but I agree with you. Bye Bye Love. Almost everybody ridicules, that version. It's so different from the Everly Brothers.
Yeah.
What do you make of, we brought up George's sense of humor before. And when you think about, all the difficulties he had with the My Sweet Lord lawsuit, and then to come right back and write this song. And here he is, he's having trouble with his marriage with Patty. And he's doing this song, Bye Bye Love. And even though Eric and Patty are kind of listed in the credits, it's debatable whether or not they're really even on it. I tend to think not, but
no, I don't think so.
He even, kind of pokes fun of that relationship. We've all heard what George said about Patty leaving him for Eric, saying it's better that she was with him than with some jerk,
Yeah, some dope.
Yeah. And he's able to, show a sense of humor in his own arrangement of Bye Bye Love. But what are your thoughts about that recording?
I think it was just done for his way of, I don't know what it's like in America, but in Britain, I think the logic tends to be, if people are going to know about this, then you present it, you beat them to the punch. Or it's the stand-up comedy thing of like, I mean, if you're a comedian who's a slightly bit too heavy, you make that joke about yourself, and that way it deflates any hecklers in the audience, or it takes the power away from your dissenters or your biggest critics. So this is him saying, yeah, I know she's left me for my best friend, let's get on with it.
Right.
Going back to Bond, I mean, I know that's what Daniel. Yeah.
That's what?
I know, going back to Bond, I know that's what Daniel Craig would do when everyone was going about how he's a blonde Bond, he's not Bond. He'd read the reviews and bring it up in front of a presenter and saying, "Oh, how can this short blonde guy be Bond?" And I mean, and as in it's taking pressure off his shoulders and making it into a bit of a joke.
Good point. I just I really like when an artist does a completely different arrangement altogether that is totally his own. And it's tough when you're dealing with something of iconic status like Bye Bye Love, a song like that. And George even went to add lyrics, his own verses to the song. So I kind of applaud him for putting some effort into it. But, I think a lot of people can't fully understand how George can have that take on the whole situation. It's one thing to lose your wife to someone else, but if it's your best friend, it's hard. It's difficult to understand that for some people. So
he wasn't exactly innocent of that himself. I mean, he and Maureen Starkey.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Good point.
That's the public knowledge. That's nothing.
I know.
Yeah. I know. It's a bit weird. I mean, I'm sure George was sensible enough to realize, well, I'm not exactly an innocent flower. As like Paul says in the Martin Scorsese film, George liked what men like. He was red-blooded.
Yep. He had a very healthy appetite. Maya Love has always been like a favorite of mine. Such a good funky track. It's always interesting to me to know what songs George decides to do live for the few times that he did perform live. And so when he did the Dark Horse tour, he did Harry's on Tour, he did Dark Horse, and he did Maya Love. And so that's a song that really works well to me as a live recording, especially with Billy Preston being on it. And Billy's on tour with him. You know, so what are your thoughts about Maya Love?
As I said earlier in the episode, it's a lovely song, the vocal in it. I think maybe in this instance, I'd love to hear someone covering it. Even a modern songwriter, even I could hear Adele singing it. I think she'd do a really good version of it.
Are there songs from George kind of like Maya Love, where you're so used to George's guitar playing and what he brings as a lead guitarist and a slide guitarist, that it's kind of tough to top, you know, or to make it your own, you know?
I don't know. People say that all the time. I mean,
About
Joe
the
Cocker.
Yeah.
I mean, Joe Cocker did a better version. Okay, not better, but he really made "I'll Cry Instead" and "Little Help from My Friends" his own. It is possible. Another. Or what's the name of that guy? He did a really good version of Eleanor Rigby. He played it's him and a guitar. He had a big hit in 1980, going, "Well, I've been going back to my roots."
I don't know which version that is, but
okay.
There's a lot of artists out there where the Beatles are concerned, where people have done great cover versions, and in their own style, and it works for them, and it's great. So, you know, this is just a debatable thing for someone like myself, and I love cover versions. Don't get me wrong. It's kind of hard for anyone to top the Beatles recordings of their own songs. You know, I don't necessarily feel that, and I love Joe Cocker's "With a Little Help from My Friends," but I still love the Beatles version the most. It's kind of very, you know, it shouldn't be a competition between the two.
No.
In the case of George, I'm so used to his guitar playing wrapping around the song that it adds so much. You know, his guitar playing is so expressive on so much of his songs that, you know, but they're still great songs. That's the most important thing, period. You know.
I'll actually, going on covers, I think the definitive version of "Long and Winding Road" is the one Paul did in 1984 on Broad Street. I mean, I think the arrangement is much nicer and much cleaner.
So you like it with the sax and everything like that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the strings aren't the problem. It's the way Spector directed them, I think, is the problem on the original. They drown everything else out.
It's different for me because I was brought up on that version, and it's always been my favorite version, but it's one of my favorite songs ever from any artist, and any version that Paul's done, I've enjoyed. So,
that's good.
You know, there's a version that Paul does with his band in the 1989, well, around the Flowers in the Dirt period, which was a bonus track. And it's a very simple production, you know, and it's beautiful just by itself. It's beautiful without any orchestration, you know, the versions that have come out. So drives home my point that it's the song that matters to me anyway, more than the arrangement. But
I agree.
But that song is just so beautiful in and of itself. And Paul has performed the song in a variety of ways throughout his solo career, and they all work for me. But you know, I do love the Phil Spector production too, and I've always been that way. I love what Phil did on the Let It Be album. So we could easily go do a whole show now on Let It Be, but
we love you. We love you for all your faults, Ken.
Okay, I got to be honest about my feelings anyway. You know,
That's true. That's
I honestly
yeah.
think sometimes where the long and winding road is concerned, if the public never knew how Paul felt, would they be so
Yeah.
against the Phil Spector production? Because some people feel they have to take Paul's side, like you. So Paul's always right. I mean, what he has to
No, of
say
course,
about his
Paul's not
music.
always right.
Yeah.
No, I know. Yeah, Paul's always right. I mean, you just have to look at the Press to Play album to see that Paul's not always right. I mean, I
Oh,
agree with
don't.
Eric Stewart. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh God. The songs are brilliant on Press to Play. It's the production I have an issue with. Yeah,
Okay, so you're more you take the Eric Stewart side on that. You
for
know,
sure, 100%. Yeah.
well, hopefully here on this channel, I'm going to be doing a lot of shows on Press to Play because it's such a fascinating time in Paul's career. Really, the first
Mhm.
time
Yeah.
outside of, well, he did the 3 albums with George Martin and Back to the Egg,
Yeah.
co-producing with Chris Thomas, but it's the first time he had to step out and work with a different producer that he hadn't worked with before. And it's also symbolic to me of a lot of Beatle fans who like the production of 60s and 70s music, but didn't embrace the 80s and synthesizers and techno pop and all that other stuff. They didn't want
Yeah.
to move on and accept, different types of production. But
Yeah.
but Press to Play, and we'll get back to Dark Horse in just a moment. But Press to Play is such a fascinating album because you've got two people here, Eric Stewart and Hugh Padgham, who both dislike the album for two completely different
Mhm.
reasons. you
Yeah.
know, Eric Stewart didn't like the production on it. Hugh Padgham didn't like the
What's too
songs.
silly?
That's what he said. That's what Eric Stewart said.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, as you know, I've interviewed Eric Stewart,
Yeah.
and yeah, he also gave an interview with Super Deluxe Edition. So it's
Right.
either my interview or Super Deluxe Editions, where he's going on about tinny and flipping saxophones. But no, he definitely said in the interview with me that he just thought it was too tinny. It was too. Yeah, he really wasn't happy, and this didn't make it into the final print of the interview of on Culture Sonar. But he said to me that Hugh confided in him and said, "I wouldn't know an A flat from a basement flat." Because Hugh Padgham is an engineer, he's not a musician. So Eric said, "Oh, that's okay. I'll help you. I'll guide you." And then he got replaced. But that's Eric's side of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, we don't know how Paul feels because he never talks about the album. So,
oh yeah, this wasn't. Yeah.
well, we'll see if there's ever a box set. I hope there will be an
I
archival
hope
one.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd much rather an archive of Press to Play than Back to the Egg. I think Back to the Egg works fine by itself, but Press to Play would be interesting to hear all the outtakes and all the.
It's all in how you look at it. I mean, when it comes to these archival box sets, I immediately go to the bonus material more so than the remix or
Yeah.
remaster. I don't
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm the biggest fan of remixes because I love the production the way solo Beatles stuff was produced in most cases.
Yeah.
I'm not that critical of the production on their albums. And interestingly with Paul, you notice that with the exception of Tug of War, none of his albums have been remixed. They've been remastered.
Ooh.
So yeah. And
What's the
but
Tug of War?
what's that?
Why Tug of War? It's seen as his best album by many.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anybody ask him that question. But
It probably is his best.
well, it's
Yeah.
one of his best.
Yeah.
There's so many albums from him. There's at least 10 albums from him that I consider to be great, truly great.
Yeah.
And Tug of War
Yeah.
is one of them. And yeah, but I always look forward to all the extra material that's on these box
Yeah.
sets more so than the remaster or the remix. And with Back to the Egg, you've got a lot that you can work with there. You got the TV special that he made with all the videos. You've got performances like the concert for Kampuchea, if you want to work that in. Um,
Yeah.
You've got a live concert from that tour that was actually considered for release that Jeff Emmerich worked on. You know, that's been bootlegged widely. But there's a lot you can do with Back to the Egg. And with Press to Play, if you include all the other stuff before it came out that Phil Ramone produced, David Foster, and a lot of that's been bootlegged already, you know, on Pizza and Fairy Tales and stuff like that. But there's so much, you know, the man has been amazingly prolific, you know, even when there may be gaps there when he doesn't have a new album out for a few years, there's all this other stuff that hasn't come out that he's worked on. So, yeah. But getting back to Dark Horse, the title track I've always loved. Such an interesting introduction on the guitar for a song, and to build around that riff. But your thoughts about that particular song?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. It's clearly, it works as two ways. It has the dark horse being Liverpool slang for the one nobody expects. So he's the dark horse of the Beatles. You know, he's the quiet one. He's the one that he's, you know, the grumpy one. He's the one who doesn't want to be there. He's the so he's admonishing that. And there's also the idea of a horse being, you know, well endowed, and there's the sexual aspect to it. I'm not even listen to the song again. There's that element to it.
I never knew about that aspect. I heard George talk about the song and referring to like when neighbors that lived near him would talk about somebody else in the neighborhood. Oh, she's a dark horse. Like somebody in that area was kind of naughty. Kind of. You know, I never heard
naughty. A bit of a clairvoyant.
Yeah. Okay.
And plus, like as you said, he had a nice appetite for meat. Even though in real life he was a vegetarian, but I mean in his other life he likes meat.
Really?
I think it was Bill Harry who said. Yeah, of course, yeah. I think it was Bill Harry who said that. Okay, well, if John had the most lovers, George was a very close second. They were the two who would.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We're going in a direction here I wasn't expecting. But
okay.
There's Far East Man on the album. I've always liked that song a lot, and we've talked about at certain stages, and I think it kind of started with Dark Horse, the album, where there's sort of like jazz, a light jazz feel to certain songs in George's music, and Far East Man is definitely one of those songs.
Yeah, I prefer the Ronnie Wood version because it's a bit more compact and tighter. I think there's a lot of noodling on the George song that doesn't need to be there, but it's still a very accomplished song. And I mean, I like the fact that it shows his worldviews and his world philosophies, and around the time he's advocating for a world passport. So he says, I don't want to be English or a Hindu or white. We're all just people. So I mean, this so Far East Man has that, you know, universalistic viewpoint of the world.
I've always enjoyed it, and I like the whole arrangement. It kind of later on you could hear, like in Pure Smoky, it's like the same kind of an arrangement to me in the song.
And for more thoughts on Pure Smoke, watch our video on Extra Texture. Click it down there.
Okay. I'll have to remember what we said. But I will confide in you that one of my favorite George Harrison songs in his solo career, and I feel like I'm in a minority here, is It Is He, Jai Shri Krishna. I love the chanting aspect of it. I love the flutes and how that works its way into the arrangement. It's so perfect um, in every way. And no, it may not be My Sweet Lord to a lot of people, but I think it works, on this level,
Yeah. No, yeah, it's a again, I'm reiterating myself, wonderful recording, the vocals. I don't know what it was. Was it him being overworked? Was it the cocaine? Was it the throat infection? But he didn't have a great voice in 1974.
Well, like I said, I'm so used to the album and the way he sounded there that I may not hear the hoarseness as other people do. I kind of like his vocals on the album, and they're also not. I feel like the vocals are kind of drier. There isn't like any reverb, so maybe any imperfections on his voice might be more noticeable to a lot of people on Dark Horse.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you're listening to
No,
All Things Must Pass, his vocals have a lot of reverb on it. Less on Living in the Material World, though. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, I like I say when it works. I mean, I like the hoarseness on Dark Horse. Ha 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 ha. But there's other times where it gets a little distracting.
Okay.
You're listening to Marlon Brando.
You doing Marlon Brando or are you doing George Harrison?
Michael,
We're getting to see the next career that Owen's about to embark on here.
Yeah.
You will be the next Rich Little. Now I'm showing my age. I'm going to read this. Guys, I love the way you write here. It's just so concise in everything that you say. But in your article on Dark Horse, I'm going to read one paragraph. It says, "It was the sound of a man drowning in his religion, struggling through tiring laryngitis, coasting his way through cocaine and waving goodbye to the dying vestige of a marriage. In its purest form, the album explored the spiritual and the sexual, secular in its production and spirit, the ragged Far East man, the heedful, it is he, Jay Sri Krishna, the naked, simply shady, and the gorgeous, so sad, opens listeners into Harrison's innermost thoughts, dreams, desires, and failings, laced with embittered irony. Sanskrit entered his lyrics, jazz in his music, Tom Scott's sterling saxophone work pushing through the album, welcomed on the bubbling ding dong ding dong. On a dense record, Dark Horse opens with the zestful, I like that, zestful, Harry's on Tour Express, a chirpy instrumental that demonstrated Harrison's mastery of the slide guitar, boasted his flippancy for title at a time when his interviews painted him humorless and grumpy. Very well written right there. I think that really sums up. It sums up the album pretty well. I could see how some people might think Far East Man is ragged, but for the most part, I've always enjoyed, all the songs on Dark Horse. It's just that when you take a look at his catalog as a whole, it's kind of like when you're talking about the Beatles, every Beatles album to me was a great album. But as one of my colleagues would say on Things We Said Today, Darren DeVivo, there's always got to be one that's at the bottom. I don't know if I would put Dark Horse at the bottom, but it's just that he's made so many other better albums than Dark Horse. But I kind of look at, and this is just me, Somewhere in England and Extra Texture. I know how much you like Extra Texture. Those are kind of at the bottom, and Dark Horse is a little bit above those. That's just me. Hey, the fun thing is we share our opinions here. So I was kind of surprised when you said Extra Texture was your second favorite Harrison album.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah, personal favorites. I mean, I just think the sound production is just outstanding. As I say, I think George was first and foremost a musician par excellence, and then a songwriter. I'm really glad you read that review. I mean, it brings back a lot of happy memories. Yeah, it was written just before COVID, and you know, I was living in Dublin, and I was dating a gorgeous Irish Brazilian lady called oh, I won't name her, and she was a massive George Harrison fan. And yeah, I showed her these drafts. You know, she was very taken with it. And yeah, I mean, although that ended 2 years ago, I mean, it's you know, it's a nice memory to have. You know, like, I mean, sharing your work and someone enjoying it. So yeah. And yeah, missing the freedoms that we don't have anymore because of this plague.
Did she share the same opinions as you did about George's music?
Yeah, and like she said, that was a really well written piece. And yeah, I mean, even when we broke up, she did say, like, I mean, she said, oh, I think she said something like something about me not being a great person, but she said you are a very good writer. So I'll take that.
No, you are an excellent writer. I think there's a skill not only in writing well, but writing concisely. And you summed up so much in that one paragraph. You also closed the article. Let me, can I just read the last paragraph here, which is really short, but it says a lot. In its uncompromising way, there is a beauty to the album, stark in atmosphere, cobbled in voice. See, I would have cobbled, perfect word there. Dark Horse has an aroma all of its own and sits as singularly in Harrison's canon as Plastic Ono Band did in Lennon's. It's a powerful statement that rises above the poor reviews of its era and shows the man, not the Beatle, who played the American theaters of '74. Beautifully written there.
Thank you. That's very good. Yeah, I have to give a shout out to your former colleague, Cindy Grogan. She was the one who commissioned the piece because she said it's a favorite of hers. And like you, she seemed quite taken with the piece.
Yeah. And it really does explain, like, you know, where his head was at that time in so many different ways. You know, there is the spiritual, and then he's kind of telling it where it's at with Bye Bye Love and his relationship with Patty and all this other stuff. And I find things to like in everything that George does and in all the solo Beatle music. So yeah, so if you were to place this album of all the George Harrison solo albums, let's say from All Things Must Pass On, because, you know, electronic sound is, you know, it's not the same thing as all the pop albums. And Wonderwall Music is really a soundtrack album, although it's all very interesting instrumental stuff. From All Things Must Pass Through, Brainwash.
I find it easier to rank.
Easier to what?
I find it easier to rank the 70s albums. So if we're doing that, All Things Must Pass is number 1. Texture number 2. Material World and George Harrison is very close. 4th is Material World, narrowly pips it. And then my least favorite of the 70s is the 33. So Dark Horse comes in at a pleasant 5th.
Okay. All right. Actually, this makes a perfect segue into talking about your new book.
It will be explained in I tried to explain why I think the 33 1/3 album isn't up there. So yes, as you very kindly egged me on, this is my second book for Sonic Bound. The first book I wrote was on YouTube, and this one is on George Harrison in the 70s. So the first one was about everything U2 did, but this is confined to the 70s.
Why did you decide to keep it strictly 70s?
It wasn't strictly my decision. It's a series with Sonic Bond where they want a decade. And actually, I'm going to give a shout out to Adrian Sinclair, who I'm sure is going to write the best book on Paul McCartney. Alan Cozen have been working on it for a long, long time. he was the one. I came to him saying, should I write one on Paul or John? I said, I know you're writing one on Paul, and he said, why not George? The music is fantastic. And I had to think about it. I listened to Extra Texture. I was like, yeah, I mean, we've got Man on the Run. We've got all these books on John. There are some brilliant books on George Harrison. There can be more, and why not?
He definitely deserves to be appreciated more.
Yeah.
And I personally feel that his solo music is more appreciated now in recent years.
Yeah, for sure.
And not just All Things Must Pass and Cloud Nine. Those were certainly, Cloud Nine was a big comeback for him, but commercially, a lot of people point to that as a favorite. And I got nothing against people who love it. You know, I do tend to like the spiritual side of George even more, because it tells you more about him, and the melodies are exquisite. You know, that's something that I could say about all four Beatles. They're great melodic writers, including, you know, Ringo's written a lot of great stuff now too. Indeed. But I'll be surprised. You know, we'll have you back when the new book comes out, and I'd love to know why you think, because I definitely feel that 33 1/3 was a real step up for George in terms of quality, going from Extra Texture. We feel differently, but don't get me wrong. As I've always said about Extra Texture, if all it had was the answers at the end, it's worth picking up. That's one of his best songs to me.
For sure.
And Tired of Midnight Blue, and you know, Can't Stop Thinking About You. But 33 1/3 and George Harrison back to back are just killer albums. Both very strong albums to me anyway. So, but I like hearing different opinions, and we'll get to hear more of your opinions on George when the new book comes out, which is March, correct?
Yeah, that's the projected. It might be a little later. I mean, given the 2-year pandemic, everything's been pushed back, but it will be out in 2022.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any?
I have sent it in.
Can you pre-order it yet?
I believe so.
I'll look into it.
All that stuff's out of my. Yeah. Okay. All that stuff's out of my hands. You can check on the Sonic Bond website. I mean, they've announced the book, and you can see the cover of the book. But the rest of the marketing stuff, I try not to get too involved with, because once you go down that rabbit hole, there's no getting out of it.
Mm-hmm. Would you consider doing a follow-up, like do George Harrison post the 70s? Because you still got the two albums from Somewhere in England, Gone Troppo, and then you've got Cloud Nine and Brainwashed. Plus, you really should include the Traveling Wilburys in there. So it's a whole other, you know, to go beyond the 70s.
No immediate plans. Yeah, no immediate plans. I mean, I recently rewatched the video of you and I in Extra Texture, and I can see the pounds I had on that I've just about managed to lose. And I'm not keen on, writing another book and having Domino's pizza on my app just because I don't have time to cook and losing and then go through the process of losing weight all over. I mean, I didn't have to do that. That's entirely on me. But there's other considering I've written 2 books over the last 2 years, there's been aspects of my life I haven't focused on that I want to focus on, but maybe in the future I'll go back to. Right now I write for Far Out Magazine, and that's my job. I work for them 5 days a week, so that's pretty good.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll be sure to share a lot of your articles on Facebook, on my Facebook page.
Thank you.
And we'll look forward to this new book on George.
Yeah. Thank you.
And
actually, I managed. Thank you. In a piece I wrote for Far Out the other day, I managed to upset a few people, and when I called Egypt Station, I think I said it was like a very poor album. Did you read it?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
You want to do a show on Egypt Station?
Egypt I think it'll be a very negative show.
Egypt Station's had a very mixed reaction, but there are people who love it and people who think it's very overrated. So you can get that at any given time with any McCartney album. You know, I think of,
Yeah.
I find it so fascinating how well received McCartney 3 was.
Yeah.
And I can certainly understand people that prefer Egypt Station over that. You know, it's but that's the beautiful thing about this entire catalog, is that there's so many different albums produced different ways. You know, Paul has had different producers. There are albums he's played all the instruments. There are albums where he has different musicians playing.
Yeah.
Then there's albums where he has his current band at the time playing on them, and they all give his albums, you know, a different feel, you know, and a different vibe. And there are people who prefer his earlier stuff because they're used to it, and it came out at a time when it was most impactful on their lives. And you know, there are lots of people who kind of stick to the 70s, Paul, and don't like when he worked with different producers. You know, it's a whole, once he started working from Hugh Padgham on, those albums, every single one of them, I think the producers he's worked with, they influenced the sound of those albums, even though Paul had the final say on everything. But it didn't have the same sound as what he did in the Wings days and in the early 70s, pre-Wings, and in the Beatle days. So for people who grew up on the 60s and 70s first, whether they lived at that time or they're new fans and discovering the Beatles and the 70s stuff, they kind of prefer that over to what he did later and don't like the polished and slick sounds of, you know, some of his later albums. And I think you've kind of expressed that to some degree in your writing there. I think don't you prefer like a McCartney 3 over an Egypt Station or a New?
For sure.
Okay, so there you go.
For sure, 100%. Yeah, because there's also, I mean, and I met up with two friends of mine in Cork, and we said it recently that what is Paul McCartney doing writing a song that's called "Fuck You"? Oh no, "For You." But it's like it's demeaning. It's like, what are you doing, man? You're the writer of Eleanor Rigby and Maybe I'm Amazed. What are you doing having, you know, these silly songs with, you know, swear words or, did I swear? Oh no. That kind of stuff.
No, a lot of people were turned off by that because they felt it was way too gimmicky, you know, for Paul.
Oh, for sure.
It certainly got him a lot of attention, which is what they kind of strive for when they do this kind of thing. More people paid attention to the song or checked it out because of that. And it probably ended up helping sales by doing so. But, you know, that's what it's all about. We all have different opinions here. But I like exploring all these different ways that all four Beatles have made their music, you know? I've talked a lot about Ringo and how I think from Time Takes Time on, he's put out the best music of his career, with the exception of the Ringo album. And I'll get people who'll defend Goodnight Vienna and the later 70s stuff more and like that more than his later stuff. And, you know, it's fine to hear all these different opinions. I love hearing all of them. So.
Well, no, I think you make a really good point. I mean, I think his best album as a singer is Boku, because he sounds fantastic on that. Like it's like he's really brought it. And then as a performer, I would go with the Ringo album. But a very close, like what it makes a very, very honorable third is Time Takes Time. Time Takes Time, because it, you know, the drum sounds fantastic. The guitars, it's very slick, it's very polished. It's to be played on the stage. He's giving it. He's giving it everything. It's his flaming pie.
I like these analogies, you know. And Dark Horse is George's Plastic Ono Band. I think I said to you that I think of Living in the Material World as being George's Plastic Ono Band, considering how deeply personal certain songs like Who Can See It, The Day the World Gets Round, Be Here Now, The Light That Has Lighted the World, those are very deeply personal songs. George telling it like it is, where he is in life, but he doesn't necessarily think of himself, you know, as a Beatle. This is him in the now. And that's what was important for him to say at that time. And so I look at that album as being, you know, closer to Plastic Ono Band. I never would associate Dark Horse that way.
Yeah, I think it's just and I think also the fact that it's so guitar heavy which like Plastic Ono Band. Plastic Ono Band is John's guitar album. I mean, it's the focus is on. I mean, you can't. I mean, I found out they're all very riff heavy. Yeah.
Okay, so you're thinking more along the lines of the electric guitar being used, more
That,
so with
that and the Confession. Yeah.
and the
But
Confession.
I see your point. Yeah.
I'm thinking more lyrically, and what's being said than anything else.
Yeah, for sure.
Anyway, so we welcome you back anytime you want. Just from this show alone, we've got 2 or 3 other ideas that we can bring to the channel. Let's do a show on Egypt Station, I guess. We'll see. But let us know let us know when the new book is out, and certainly we'll have you back on for that. And thanks for being here, Eoghan.
Thank you. Thanks very much, and I hope I pass the audition.
See, we got to get you to imitate George. Get you to work on that.
Yeah.
Okay, you got a George book coming out. Work on your George.
Ooh. Ooh. I know. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Thanks so much, and thanks to all of you for watching. And we'll see you next time. Take care.
Peace and love.